This week on the Writers Detective Bureau, FOIA, criminal complaints, and Operation Varsity Blues. I'm Adam Richardson, and this is the Writers Detective Bureau. Welcome to episode number 37 of the Writers Detective Bureau, the podcast dedicated to helping authors and screenwriters write professional quality crime-related fiction. I'd like to thank Gold Shield patron Deborah Dunbar from deborah.dunbar.com, Gold Shield patron CC Jameson from ccjameson.com, and all of my coffee club patrons, including my latest patrons Daniel Miller, Natalie Moran, and Rick Siam for their support. Please check out the show notes at writersdetective.com/37 to see which authors are serious about making their stories spot on when it comes to the cop stuff. They are the ones keeping the lights on in the Bureau, and they deserve your support. Now, when you create things for free, and you have people that appreciate those creations so much that they want to give you a little something in return, I think that's a great barometer for measuring how well you're serving your audience. And I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about you and your creations, your stories, and your worlds, the tales that you're creating for others to escape into. Your readers really appreciate your work as a storyteller. And this is why I think you should consider starting a Patreon account of your own. So you can learn more by visiting writersdetective.com/Patreon, and that's Patreon. Author Debbie Chestnut joined my APB mailing list a few days ago. So real quick, if you aren't aware of it yet, the APB is my curated list of links to resources on the internet that I think you're going to benefit from knowing about as a crime fiction writer. And I'm not talking about a bunch of affiliate links or books or anything like that. Nothing you need to buy. I'm talking about like real police procedural manuals or white papers that will help you in your writing research. Police discussion forums that will give you insight into a potential character's thinking. Many of these links are things that I find during my day job, like actually working in law enforcement. And I send those APBs out on the last day of each month. And it's packed full of links. So if you're interested in signing up, you'll get the January and February APBs as soon as you click on the sign up confirmation link. So if you join, be on the lookout for that autoresponder confirmation email. Sometimes it'll be in your spam folder, but you need to click on the confirmation link to start receiving anything from me because I don't spam people. So if you're interested in joining the APB and getting that, it's only once a month. It's on the last day of every month. Just go to writersdetective.com/mailing list. But anyway, back to Debbie. Debbie Chestnut joined the APB mailing list a couple days ago, and she sent me a really nice email, but it also included a question about FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA requests, which is the way that the public can make requests of government for basically documents that are unclassified that the government holds on to. And so this is what Debbie wrote. She says, "The issue in the book I'm currently working on is whether or not my character, not associated with the police department, can obtain records from other states regarding an unsolved murder through FOIA. It's always the little details that trip up us writers." That is a great question, Debbie. And unfortunately for writers and characters alike, the answer is usually no. FOIA, which is abbreviated as FOIA, which is why I'm saying it that way, and other sunshine laws don't extend to records relating to ongoing criminal law enforcement investigations. I went to FOIA.gov, which explains Congress has provided special protection in the FOIA for three narrow categories of law enforcement and national security records. The provisions protecting those records are known as exclusions. So these exclusions are ones where the government doesn't have to give you anything. The first exclusion protects the existence of an ongoing criminal law enforcement investigation when the subject of the investigation is unaware that it is pending and disclosure could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings. The second exclusion is limited to criminal law enforcement agencies and protects the existence of informant records when the informant's status has not been officially confirmed. The third exclusion is limited to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and protects the existence of foreign intelligence or counterintelligence or international terrorism records when the existence of such records is classified. Records falling within an exclusion are not subject to the requirements of the FOIA. So when an office or agency responds to your request, its response will encompass those records that are subject to the FOIA. So since unsolved murders remain open until solved, as there's no statute of limitations on the crime of murder, meaning, even 100 years later, it could technically be solved, they're still technically considered ongoing investigations, even if they are cold cases. But FOIA and other sunshine laws can be effective tools for authors to use in their research. But as a word of warning, I'd only resort to using them if you don't get a response after a couple attempts to a more friendly and informal request. And I say this because FOIA requests are often the prelude to a lawsuit. So you may get a lot more help by explaining to someone at the department that you're an author with an interest in a particular case, especially if it's an open, unsolved case that your book or story might help stoke the public's interest in helping solve. I know that Sue Grafton had success with that in Q is for Quarry, where she contacted a department about an open unsolved case and got some help there. So it's not unheard of, but FOIA will typically not get you the results you want if it's going to be an open case. I also highly recommend using your local courthouse for research. First, if you're in the United States and you haven't gone to court just to be a fly on the wall and sit in the audience, by all means do so. Check the court calendar for a jury trial and just go sit in the audience to listen to the testimony. Having courtrooms that are open to the public at least for most criminal proceedings, are one of the things that we should cherish about our criminal justice system. So go watch the people, and you might be surprised as to what ideas spark as a result of that little field trip. And also be sure to stop into the court clerk's office. There should be a computer available to you to search the court cases for that courthouse. It helps to have a case in mind that you're interested in. So you might do a little Google search to help with that before you go into the clerk's office to have a case in mind. But once you find a case that you're interested in, look it up in that court clerk computer. And then, so basically you'll write down the case number, and then you can actually stand in line inside the clerk's office and ask to see the case itself. Normally, you will be directed to like a microfiche or a microfilm machine, but then you can pretty much read to your heart's content. It's free to do. If you want to make copies of the court documents, you'll have to pay like whatever it is, a quarter a sheet of paper or whatever, but you can definitely take notes for free on all of the court documents. And that may include transcript like of the testimony that was given. So it can be pretty fascinating. And if you find anything interesting, I would love to hear about it. And then also, thank you so much for the question, Debbie. You can find Debbie Chestnut's books on Amazon, and I will include a link in the show notes to her author page. And the show notes will be at writersdetective.com/37. Author Robin Lyons from robinlyons.com asked, you talked about a criminal complaint in the death at sea answer, which I think was episode 35. Do other agencies beside the FBI use criminal complaints? What's the purpose of a criminal complaint document? Is it for a search warrant, an arrest? Thanks for calling me out, Robin. Yes, I should have done a better job of explaining what a criminal complaint is. So the criminal complaint is the document that a prosecutor uses to officially launch a criminal case in court. So at the state or local level, the prosecutor would file a criminal complaint form with the court to get an arraignment on calendar, which is usually the first court appearance for a defendant. At the federal level, a criminal complaint holds a similar purpose, but it differs in that a federal grand jury indictment is the next step in the procedural process, not the arraignment. So again, most local and state cases don't require involvement of a grand jury. So when we're talking about a federal criminal complaint, it is a document filed by the U.S. Attorney's Office to start the criminal process in federal court. The complaint will include a supporting affidavit that is authored by the investigating federal law enforcement agent, like an FBI special agent or a DEA special agent, that lays out the probable cause in support of essentially getting the federal magistrate to sign the criminal complaint, agreeing that at face value that there is probable cause there. Since these are usually ongoing criminal investigations, the U.S. attorney will usually include a motion to seal the criminal complaint, and this means that the prosecution is asking the court to keep the entire criminal complaint a secret throughout the grand jury indictment process. And that's in order to keep the bad guys from knowing that they're being investigated, and that they will likely be indicted. So we don't want that to happen, so the U.S. attorney will include a motion to seal the criminal complaint. Now, you don't really hear too much about criminal complaints in stories, whether that's books or TV or movies, because it's really just the piece of paper or pieces of paper that get the ball rolling in court. So it's the official start of a court case. But boy, do I have a good complaint for you to check out this week, which brings us to this week's next question. Patty Joy, author of the Bailey Homeschool Mystery series of cozy mysteries, which you can find on Amazon, and I will link to that in the show notes as well, wrote, "Real-life explanation, please. Lori Loughlin is accused of bribery of a school official. I understand why that is a federal case, but now she's also accused of money laundering. How is bribery now money laundering? I would like to understand this to maybe add it to my book." Well, Patty and Robin from the previous question, in the show notes at writersdetective.com/37, I've linked to the original criminal complaint filed by the U.S. attorney. And really, it's not the complaint, it's the affidavit in support of the complaint, which was authored by an FBI special agent, and it was filed in the U.S. District Court in Massachusetts. And then I'm also including the second superseding indictment that alleges the latest federal charges. So I will do my best to help you guys make sense of the legalese, as well as point out a few things as I answer Patty's question. So the original criminal complaint is 204 pages long, and the second superseding indictment is 54 pages long. And I think both of them are really worth your time to read. You get to see how the probable cause is presented and to see the various investigative techniques that were used. In the original complaint, the FBI agent explains, and I'm quoting here, "The facts set forth in this affidavit come from my personal involvement with this investigation, interviews with witnesses, including the cooperating witnesses described below, and my review of documents, including bank records, flight records, emails, telephone toll records, cell site data and other materials obtained through grand jury subpoenas and search warrants, as well as court-authorized Title III wiretap recordings, consensual recordings made by a cooperating witness, and information provided by other law enforcement agents." So the way that the FBI agent lays out all of these things over the 204 pages is very logical in its order. She defines who the players are, what the crimes are, including the definition of these crimes. And then she explains the facts of the case that logically lay out which player did what. And then you'll see how those actions or statements are evidence of the crimes alleged, because she has already defined what those crimes are. It all lines up in a very logical way, making it easy for the judge to follow. Now, I should mention that the original complaint is about 4 times the length of the second superseding indictment, so I don't blame you if you just read the indictment, but it's important to note that the complaint, that very first document filed in the case, like we just talked about, was authored by the FBI special agent, whereas the indictment is actually authored by the federal grand jury that was impaneled. And this goes back to that first question about criminal complaints and the role that they play at the federal level for getting that court case rolling. So hopefully this all makes sense. All right, so let's talk about the second superseding indictment. First of all, it's called that because this is the second indictment in this case, and it is superseding the original indictment. I know that kind of seems like an obvious explanation, but when it rolls off the tongue, second superseding indictment, it just sounds a bit esoteric. So normally, in a normal case, you just have a straight indictment, a grand jury indictment. But in this case, with so many defendants and moving parts, we have a second indictment that is taking over. So it is superseding that first indictment. And I haven't compared the original indictment to this second one, but I'm sure there are some significant differences in order to have a grand jury go to the extent of authoring a second indictment. And one key difference that I see, having read both the original criminal complaint and the indictment, is that in the text of the indictment, the identity of that cooperating witness or those cooperating witnesses have actually been revealed. So in the criminal complaint, they're just referred to as CW1 for cooperating witness 1 or CW2, where they're actually referred to by name in the indictment. William Rick Singer, so he goes by Rick, was the guy that operated the for-profit college test prep business, as well as the nonprofit organization that you'll hear about in a sec. So anyway, to get to Patty's question about how the bribery is now money laundering, pages 18 through 20 of that federal grand jury second superseding indictment spell out that Massimo Gianulli and Lori Laughlin, who are husband and wife, you may recognize Massimo from the clothing brand, but they were to pay $200,000 to Singer's nonprofit account once their younger daughter, he ended up working to get both daughters into college, but they were to pay $200,000 into Singer's nonprofit account once their younger daughter got her college acceptance letter. This is in section 136 of that document. So money laundering usually means you're concealing the origins of illegally obtained money by transferring it through legitimate businesses or foreign banking institutions to make the money trail appear legitimate. But in this case, the defendants are being charged with money laundering conspiracy, which is Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1956, Parent H, which says any person who conspires to commit any offense defined in this section shall be subject to the same penalties as those prescribed for the offense, the commission of which was the object of the conspiracy. That's the lawyer's way of saying that Massimo and Laughlin and the others hatched a plan with Singer or co-conspired with Singer, and that Singer's actions were the actual money laundering. So Parent A of that same U.S. Code section defines money laundering. So as it relates to this case, it's whoever, knowing that the property involved in a financial transaction represents the proceeds of some form of unlawful activity. So in this case, the unlawful activity being the conspiracy to commit honest services, mail, and wire fraud, knowing the transaction is designed to cancel or disguise the nature of the proceeds of the specified unlawful activity. So Singer and the parents were disguising the bribery payments as charitable donations. And many of the parents had the gall to actually claim those payments as tax deductions. So doing that disguising, even though Singer's technically the one doing the disguising, this was a plan that they were all conspiring in. So how are they going to prove this? If we scroll down to sections 139 and 140 of that second superseding indictment, we read about how Singer made recorded phone calls to both Massimo Gianelli and Lori Loughlin, now that Singer's an informant for the FBI, and he pretty much spells out the crime that the three of them conspired to commit. And in doing so in that conversation, he gets each of them to acknowledge it. And you'll notice in the call to Lori Loughlin, and it's detailed in section 140, that Singer explains that the 501c3 nonprofit that they're paying their money into was our foundation to help underserved kids. So I'd bet dollars to donuts that the money laundering conspiracy case is going to stem from proving, using those recorded phone calls, that Massimo Gianelli and Lori Loughlin knowingly paid $200,000 to a nonprofit account to commit honest services mail fraud and wire fraud. So I think that's where the money laundering came from. So I hope this answers your question, Patty. Be sure to check out Patty's Amazon author page, which I will include a link to in the show notes at writersdetective.com/37. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Writers Detective Bureau podcast. And remember, you can join the APB mailing list and get those curated links for crime fiction writers every month by going to writersdetective.com/mailing list. Once you confirm your subscription, you'll get the January and February APBs right away. So writersdetective.com/mailing list. Thanks again for listening. Have a great week and write well.